Hey y'all, welcome back. It's me, Mama King, the Divine Oracle, and we have another reading of the Great Cosmic Mother. We'll be reading the chapter The Olympian Male, page 235 to page 243. Alright? So settle in, y'all. Alright, it's time to get some knowledge and understanding and some truth about our history, our ancestral history. The Olympian Male. If Father God religions are reactionary and anti-evolutionary, the reason is simple. They are built in reaction to the original goddess religion, which dominated human thought and feeling for at least 300,000 years. By contrast, God has been conceptualized as a complete male for only about 3 to 4,000 years. For this reason, patriarchal religions must begin by denying evolution. For if that long stretch of human growth time was acknowledged, it would have to be credited as the evolutionary creative time of the Great Mother. To avoid this, the Father Gods just somehow appear, as it were, by spontaneous generation, and human life just suddenly appears with them, fully formed, sprung arbitrarily from the forehead of the He God, sometime around 2000 BC. Okay. The characteristic of an Olympian god, which is patriarchal, in contrast to a mystery god, which is matriarchal, is that the Olympian's form is rigidly fixed and always human. He has lost his animal forms and his magical ability to transmute from one energy shape to another. He has lost his alchemical properties. The Olympian is idealized, rationalized, aloof, deathless, and so ultimately he seems too geometric to move us. All poets have had trouble making him interesting because he isn't. The Olympian does not evolve. He apotheosizes to the blare of trumpets. This means he is not born from woman or earth or matter, but from his own absolute will. He represents a static perfection in human form, incapable of transformation or ecstatic change. As a god, he is an intellectual concept. And so the energy exchange between all creatures and their magically shape-changing deity is lost. The mystical evolutionary power connection is broken. God becomes mere idea, and his world mere mechanism. In earlier Greek myth, the full sun was still Dionysian, though described as phallic fecundary. Let me say this word again.
Fecundator.
Okay. In earlier Greek myth, the full sun was still Dionysian, though described as phallic fecundator.
Fecundator.
Phallic fecundator of the receptive earth, and that means to produce fruit, or to what does it mean? Something that gives fruit. Fecundator. Fecundator. Of the receptive earth. The legend and drama of the Greek Dionysus raised fatherhood over maternity, but still yearned ecstatically for the mother, or befet his Cretan origins. But in classic Greek mythology, Apollo, the Platonic intellectual ideal homosexual lover, was transformed into the static and immutable light, which is no longer cyclically rising and setting, coming into being and passing away. It exists absolutely, never changing. Apollo and Athene, redesigned as the motherless daughter of Zeus, together usher in the new law of paternity. Apollo declaring that the mother is no parent of that which is called her child. She is only nurse of the new planted seed that grows within her. He who mounts. Apollo freed himself from the bond with women, and so he is called immune from the night of death, which still and always confronts the all too human, phallic, and ecstatic Dionysus. Apollo becomes the spirit that rises above all change, away from the earlier subordination of spirit to physical laws and the dependence of human development on cosmic powers. Even Pallas, Athene, who still retains traces of the Cretan and Libyan Great Mother, as a remodeled Greek goddess, proclaims her purely Olympian existence, free from all material desire and free from labor pains. As she boasts and recognizes no woman, but only her father Zeus. Thus was the gestalt of the new patriarchy expressed by Greek male poets and dramatists. Athene's freedom from labor pains not only means that she refuses childbirth. The Olympians were gods of the newly established ruling elite, which did no communal work, but was serviced by slave labor. The social structure represented by the Greek Olympians was patrilinear and class hierarch. Thus it lifted itself above the age-old laws of biology and evolution, to base itself on conceptual property power. But once the cult of the mother was overthrown, the cult of the infant Zeus needed a new rationalization. For a baby is a divine attribute of a divine mother, not a father. And so we have the ludicrous spectacle of the Olympian god trying to make himself into the mother. Enter this my male womb. Greek rebirth ceremonies thereafter occurred through the father. They were correspondingly more and more connected with urban temples and social hierarch political relations. Less and less with the seasonal blood renewal of crops and herds. The Greek Olympians were a worldly ruling elite rationalized into deities. They were the gods of the urban upper classes, just as Christianity in Europe was originally, and for many centuries, the court religion of the colonizing Roman invaders and the native aristocracy that rose up through cooperation with them. Catch that. But such as an abstract father god and his non-magical rites did not appeal to the common sense of the common people. The peasants who worked the land in ancient Greece, just like the later European peasantry, knew very well from daily experience where life came from and where it went. The Greek common people in town and country continued to worship the mother goddess and take part in the mystery rites of Dionysus, of Demeter and Persephone, of Artemis, the moon. The commoners of later Rome worshipped at shrines of Diana, and the European pagans, Latin pagani, peasants of the land, continued well into the 17th century to celebrate the rites of the Great Mother, of the Wiccan, of Diana, bride, Danu, with her many names, and her brother, the goat god, Dionysus, Lucifer, the horned one. But the signature of the new Olympian male was that he represented not the peasants on land, nor the masses of the people, but the ruling elite, who had the secular power to back him up. Where did this power come from? The triumph of patriarchy in the Bronze Age corresponded with the development of heavy metals and their connection with professional warfare.
Metallurgy.
Metallurgy, when it first appeared, was a highly ritualized and sacred art under guardianship of the goddess, with strong taboos attached to it. Metals were light, gold, silver, tin, copper, and were mostly shaped into jewelry, ornaments, ceremonial vessels. Undoubtedly, the mystery transformation of running hot metals into ornaments and tools using fire, molds, and ovens was first developed by women incidentally to their experimentation with pottery. Once developed into a distinct art, mining and smelting seem to have been the special tasks of men who lived apart under religious restrictions or taboo. The only male figures found on Cretan seals were tiny bodies of smiths, scratched beside the larger figure of the goddess.
Metallurgy.
Sacred metallurgy served the Neolithic. goddess and the people wisely. But in the Bronze Age, the ritual controls were broken. Metallurgy, this is very hard for me to say this word, metallurgy passed into the male sphere entirely, becoming a secular industry or a religious industry in service to the god of war. This opened the earth up for the first time to violent exploitation, including struggles between male groups for control over the earth's ores. Some evidence suggests, as John G. Jackson wrote, that iron smelting began in Central Africa. According to Merlin Stone, the process of mining and smelting iron ore were discovered by the Aryan Hittites circa 2500 BC. We don't know. The significant fact is that compared with the copper, gold, and bronze of the goddess cultures, iron was a much stronger and more abundant material. In particular, it provided more efficient, heavier weapons. The Aryan people kept their iron smelting process secret for many centuries, as on it depended their technological supremacy and soul power, SOLE, over the more culturally and practically developed matriarchal peoples. The Indo-Europeans, for example, had no written language of their own, but adopted the script of the peoples they conquered. In this adapted script, the sign for man, iron, and Mars, the war god, are the same. Further, the goddess people used the wheeled wagon, their invention, pulled by a donkey for daily use and trade. The Anatolian Hittites and later Near Eastern warrior people were the first to harness up horses, turning wagons into war chariots. T.C. Lethbridge in Witches speculates that it was the development of metallurgy as a male art that brought the end of the mother goddess cultures. Larger and heavier metal weapons radically changed men's experience and techniques of war, giving advantage to the emerging professional warrior, and changing warfare from a defensive tribal skill to a whole new game, stressing aggressive offense and the spoils of victory. The new weapons mounted on wheeled wagons will also allow war to be carried on much farther from home. War became a specialty of roaming mercenaries, while the women remained at the home village, maintaining the culture. And constant among Neolithic agricultural people as among African tribal gardeners until quite recently. Okay, both women and men carried spears and other weapons with them into the fields, and if attacked, both sexes fought defensively. So, ironically, matriarchal culture was overthrown with the help of the new heavy artillery, mined and stolen from Mother Earth. Perhaps this is why even today witches must not touch iron. Metal mining and smelting remain the most male-dominated of all professions, and access to ores remains a major criterion of male power states. So long as Stone Age hunting was a major survival occupation, it kept men busy on the peripheries of the women's camp. Hunting kept men away from the home base, sometimes for long periods, but it also provided a ritual focus in the cave religion. Hunting gave men a spiritual and group identity within the worship of the Great Mother. But women's invention of agriculture and domestication of animals, together with settled village life, created a steady food abundance that rendered hunting more or less obsolete. Interesting. There was suddenly a large male labor force hanging around needing occupation. Idle hands are the devil's workshop. Wall paintings found at Katal Huyuk in the most recent levels, 5400 BC, show men engaged in ritual hunting, dressed in leopard skins and accompanied by magicians, as Thompson notes. These paintings aren't of real Stone Age hunting, but of deer baiting and bull baiting, and are commemorations or images of nostalgia for the good old days of the hunt. Hunting was no longer necessary, and men could no longer find purpose and spiritual identity through it. Men's work around the settled village was at first unskilled labor, helping the women. They cleared away brush, prepared the ground for cultivation by women. This is still so in Africa, where farming remains traditionally women's work. It is so among some Native Americans, Indonesians, and many others. Men felled trees and prepared timber for construction. Only later did they begin to take over the work of construction design itself, as they also slowly began to take over the care and breeding of livestock, husbandry. Is that what they call it now? Only later did they begin to take over the work of construction design itself, as they also slowly began to take over the care and breeding of livestock. So with the buildup of stored grain, with every increase in Neolithic abundance in settled village sites, appeared a new male profession, grain guardian. Organized marauding began in the later Neolithic, and as stored wealth increased and marauding increased, the males guarding grain supplies organized more and more into a kind of standing army. Stock breeding also led to the discovery of paternity, of the male's role in breeding, and the importance of genetic selection. Originally, as Thompson points out, the domestication of animals was a religious act, an emotional act in which the animals were first domesticated because of their symbolic connection to the great universal religions of the goddess. As men took over stock breeding, the cattle herds took on a secular aspect. They became symbols of male wealth, power, and potency. It cannot be an accident that the word capitalism comes from the Latin caput or capitalium, originally referred to a head of cattle. This new, probably awesome male sense of paternity was the seed that was to grow into the Father God. But the actual growth of male power derived from men's increasing takeover, and what can only be called industrialization of women's ancient crafts and tasks. Unlike the women, the men did not have to start from scratch. Millennia of women's work laid the groundwork for the male revolution of the Bronze Age. In a relatively brief time, men began not only to learn the skills and crafts of the women, but to make improvements in tools and methods, always in the direction of mass production. Men invented the plow, men invented the potter's wheel. It is very likely that women had not made these improvements because they were reluctant to break their direct connections with their materials. Craft was, like sacred ritual, a matter of rhythm and movement, of tactility. Women worked earth with hands and digging sticks. Women worked clay with their hands, shaping the clay spirals for bowls on their breasts. The more advanced tools and techniques developed by men interposed themselves between the body of the worker and the body of the mother substance. Oh, yes, I see. They objectified the task and secularized it, which women wouldn't do. All Bronze Age male improvements on women's ancient crafts were in the direction of speed up, mass production, quantity over quality, the factory and the assembly line. For a time, as men shared tasks but did not take them over, there must have been a truly egalitarian society, with women and men working side by side in the same jobs, furthering together the abundance of food, textiles, building materials, consolidating the first towns and small cities with their surplus production. But this was not to last. One of the strangest and bitterest facts of later male domination over women is that the major tools and industries of this domination were the inventions of women, and first given to the men by the women. The ceramic, textile, and clothing industries, the medical and healing professions, farming and the food industry, animal domestication, writing and calendric science, numbers and chemistry, religious symbol and ritual. All women's creations were taken over by men and then closed to women's entry, except under slave conditions. In the same way, men took over women's menstruation and childbirth rights and then kept women away from these rights under taboo of death. We are told that men created civilization, but it was women's achievements in the areas of craft, cultural, and intellectual production that made their civilization possible. It was women who were biologically endowed to create human society, language, and culture. And then it was men who were socially endowed by women who turned around and declared women unfit for culture, using women's biological endowment as a justification for our oppression. Along with the pottery wheel and the plow, men in the Neolithic did invent one more thing: professional warfare. The more insignificant male activities were, and the more women's activities produced wealth, the more some men were attracted to steal and other men attracted to defend the new acquisitions. The men discovered a new way to get together, and warfare was born. This was not, as Thompson describes it, the stylized agons of hunters over grievances, which ended in no or few deaths. This was institutionalized violence. This was war, the legal art of mass slaughter. In warfare, men refound the group and spiritual identity that had lost with the loss of the Stone Age hunting life. A new god, the male war god, could be erected to numanize it, to make it seem holy. But no one could deny warfare had its very secular, practical side. It was a primary builder of male wealth, and thence of a ruling elite. Most of all, for the first time, it gave men the power to control women, i.e., professional warfare allowed organized and iron-armed males to destroy the ancient female collectivity. The period 6 to 4000 BC is the Magnus Annunus of the Neolithic great goddess. Okay. Women had been at the top of traditional Neolithic society, but with the shift from religious magical authority to masculine military power, their influence collapsed and they became private property in the new trading and raiding society. Mesolithic society may have seen the domestication of animals, and Neolithic society may have seen the domestication of plants. But what the age after the Neolithic sees is the domestication of women by men. The great mother of all in the Bronze Age was reified into a mere vessel of male seed. Woman, in male eyes, was no longer a powerful creator in her own right, but a piece of property. His new wealth, his new power over life, his new military ability to maim, terrify, and slaughter by the hundreds and thousands gave man a haughty contempt for life. Once he had been in awe of life, but now he found how easy it was to push life around, to kill it. Man's new contempt for life extended to woman, of course, since for millennia she had stood as the numinous symbol of life's sacredness, life's holy power. But now he had the power, and he found he could also easily invent his own sacredness by fiat. God became male, a warrior male in his image. In early patriarchy, women's ancient community tasks were turned into slave labor. Women produced the surplus products on which men based their secular power and control. In the next stage of economic development, these slave tasks became the industrial occupations of the workers, while the ruling men and their wives were exempt from labor. The ruling men reserved for themselves the manly occupations of war, hunting, sport, and priestly observances, while workers kept the world going. Women's forced labor and later working class labor freed elite males to become lawyers, judges, doctors, artists, priests, and warriors, specialized, privileged occupations that all others are barred from. And whole bodies of law, religious doctrine, and custom are then assembled to forcibly maintain these men in these positions of power. Patriarchal law, often called the will of God, is in fact a wholly secular, cynical legal system designed purposely to maintain male power through institutional control of female energy. Under patriarchal legal, religious, and economic social systems, some men dominate others, but all men benefit from their organized domination of the community of women, which is no longer a community. Patriarchy breaks up the female collective by forcibly capturing and imprisoning each woman's female energy within the patriarchal family. Within this isolation cell, each woman's creative energy becomes servant energy, directed and owned by men. In the Hindu code of Manu, typical of all patriarchal family law, the woman must never be free, from birth to death, of subjugation to a male relative. She passes from the guardianship of her father to that of her husband, and finally to her oldest son. They control her education, her property, the total disposal of her mind and body, in life and in death. The ignobility, I've never seen that word or heard it, but I like it. The ignobility of this male obsession with control is equaled only by its effectiveness. Under the code of Manu, the Hindu woman becomes a non-person. The breaking up of the powerful ancient women's collectives was the only way by which men could have broken women's strength and independence, but still keep a vaguely living body around to do the dirty work in bed and bathroom. Wow. What better way to turn the great goddess into a sex serf than by isolating each individual woman, keeping her under total control within the male-dominated and defined family household, where she is never allowed freedom of movement, of thought, of desire, where her body, her mind, her labor, and her children are seen as property, wealth belonging to the man. Conscientiously.
Conscientiously.
Yep. A thorough and responsible way to her daughters. Wow. That's the only thing she can do, because she knows what's being passed down. So Confucius, circa 600 BC in China, advocated the patriarchal totalitarian. Okay, I'll get it. Confucius, circa 600 BC in China, advocated the patriarchal totalitarian state. The functional basis of this state was defined as women's three obediences to father, husband, and sons. In the 20th century, Adolf Hitler in Germany articulated the three spheres of women: children, Christian church, and kitchen. Wow. Codified in these slogans, which were also laws, is a simple fact. Between these two men lay over 2,500 years of patriarchal society, built and maintained worldwide entirely by the exploitation of women's biological creation and physical labor. Whatever we see of male civilization seems to be built fascistically on women's backs. The goddess had been all-powerful, but she was a mother of sons as well as daughters. Sons came from her body, were nourished by her breast, and it was not her desire that men should be degraded or destroyed. Under matriarchy, men were not reduced to mechanical units, to slave labor, or to subhuman objects. She knew that she was the parent and did not have to enforce unnatural religion with unnatural law. It is I who adorneth the male for the female. Her son was also her lover. His systemic degradation would have degraded her, who desired only free and graceful worshippers. In no goddess religion known were people ever depicted on their knees. But patriarchy must maintain by force an unnatural system. Since the supreme creator is a male, woman must be redefined as male property, i.e., as wife. In fact, the very idea of a male creator god carries within itself the necessity for some kind of tightly controlled class, caste, society, because it is only through the creation of life, through human mothers, now passive and powerless, that the male god can claim glory for himself. He does not go through the dangerous episode of childbirth in his own person. He uses women to do it for him. Then, contrary to the truth, he claims that he is the almighty creator. The woman, at best, is patronized for her role as divine housewife. The sacred sphere of women's daily communal work and ritual is destroyed, as women are isolated individually in men's households, and women's industries and labor are exploited to build male empires. With the further destruction of the rights of the death goddess, with their prohibition and or co-optation of the male churches, with moral and legal suppression of the ecstatic ceremonies of Soma, Pythonic divination, and pagan cults of celebratory rebirth of all things, little remains of the goddess in patriarchal culture, but a wife of tamed or nervous sexuality and utterly desecrated, because isolated, mind. Thank you for joining me. Thank you for liking and subscribing. I appreciate all your positive energy and your good comments. Keep them coming. And I will see y'all soon.